Evening and welcome to this webinar on how to ace GMAT sentence correction. My name is Rajat Sadana. I'm one of the co-founders of e-GMAT and I'm going to be your main host today. Um, for those of you who are expecting Payal to host this webinar, she actually has undergone a major surgery and she's unable to speak. So I'm going to try and do justice to this webinar. For those of you who are one of our regular attendees, I'd like you to give feedback as to whether I've done justice to this webinar. So the goal of this webinar is to help you get to that 90th percentile in GMAT sentence correction. And it's to pave the path to kind of enlighten you as to what is it that you need to do to get there. Um, and at the end of this webinar, if you can have a clear idea as to, hey, these are 3 or 4 things that you need to do to get there, and this is where you're going to invest your time, then I feel I will have been successful by the end. Um, this is a very application focused webinar. We're going to solve some difficult questions in this webinar, and to make sure that you are prepared to solve those difficult questions, we did send a few video lessons your way. Not very many. We're not going to use a ton of grammatical concepts. We're not going to use complex grammatical concepts. In fact, if you follow the approach that we recommend in this webinar, you're going to find you don't need to be a grammarian to ace GMAT sentence correction. Those concepts are in the verb ing, modifiers, verb ing, phrases, verb ed phrases, and so on and so forth. These concepts are a part of your free trial. So post this webinar, if you want to go check them out, and I do recommend that you check them out. Definitely log into your e-GMAT account and go through them. With that, we also have some upcoming free webinars. We have another free webinar on GMAT number properties. That is tomorrow. If number properties is an area of concern for you, if you want to really figure out how, just by knowing the basics, you can solve the most challenging questions that the test can throw at you, this is the webinar for you. And then next Saturday, a week from now, we have a webinar on GMAT reading comprehension. Again, very similar theme, application focused. In this webinar, actually, we dispel some myths that people have about how to approach GMAT reading comprehension. A lot of people, just after adopting these strategies, are able to see a 20-30 percentile point improvement in their RC abilities. With that, is a fairly large group over here, and what we want to really do is we want to kind of make sure we understand the makeup of this group. So we asked us a few leading questions, which one of them is, when do you plan to take the test? The next one is, what is your target GMAT score? Let me actually clear the poll over here. So what's your target GMAT score? If you've not responded to any of these questions, please do so. The first question, when do you plan to take the test? What we really see is that there's a fairly even mix of folks over here. The two big groups, of course, those who have more than 45 days and those who haven't planned their date as of yet. But then the other 3 groups also have significant people. There are at least 10 people in each group over here, which makes good representation, good representative inputs over here. So that's great. And then with regards to the target GMAT scores, excuse me, the biggest chunk is the majority over here. 63% of you are in that 730 to 760 bucket. That's great. But again, a good number of folks in the 660 to 700, 710, 720, and those who are looking at a score of 770 or more. Okay. With that, let's go right into what we call as the presentation pane. And again, because this webinar was originally hosted, supposed to be hosted by Payal, so you're going to see a lot of polls which say answer Payal's question. So before we start this webinar, I want to kind of make sure that you guys are motivated enough to get to a score of 730 or higher. And I think I want to kind of put that threshold with regards to if you're going to do an MBA in the US or in Europe, should aim for that score of 730 or higher. Why? Because if you look at the trends over the last 5 years towards admissions, towards scholarships, you're going to find that 730 is kind of the new 700, or what 700 was considered to be when I actually, frankly, took the exam. There are essentially three reasons why you should aim for a score of 730 or higher. One is, when you look at the stats, top business schools, and when I say top business schools, among the top 25 schools that we're talking about, now require a score of 730 or more. So I think that's kind of the 730 is that sweet spot where your score gives you enough that your profile shines through. If you have a score higher than 730, then your score is also an advantageous factor. The second piece, which I think is very compelling, pretty much for everyone over here, I shouldn't say just international students, is that more than 50% of the huge scholarship kitty, and the scholarship kitty has grown bigger over the last 8 years or so. More than 50% of that goes to students scoring 730 or higher. And this is an e-GMAT estimate. e-GMAT has got about $30 million worth of scholarship every year that they report to us. So, and we see that trend, and I think that's a good enough sample to really make that inference. And when you think about the difference in total earnings over a 10-year period, I think when you think about the total difference in total earnings over a 10-year period, and if you do the math, what you're going to find is that the difference is highest when you look at a tier 2 school versus a tier 1 school. The delta is highest today than it has ever been, and that's because when you look at the starting salaries from tier 1 schools, they are the highest that they've ever been. And there's this other piece where people say the MBA is no longer relevant, but if you look at the stats and then you say what companies are paying for graduates who come out of let's say not just a Harvard, Stanford, but even a Keenan Flagler or a Tuck or a Wharton or a Tepper or so. It's record amount of money, record amount of bonuses as well. So essentially, these 30 points, and so 730 is the new 700, could be worth close to $500,000 worth in net worth over a course of 10 years. So if you want to get to that 730 score with that little motivation, what should your target ability be? So any guesses? For most people, if you want to get to that 730 plus score, what should that target ability be? So the ability is always out of 100. It's a rank. So it's not a verbal score. It's not a score out of 800. It's just a score out of 100, or it's a score. You can say out of 60, but you won't call it V45. You should call it SC45 if you truly were to say that. But a more precise way to say that is out of 100, or in terms of percentile. An ability is a comparative term. So you compare yourself to the target test taking population. So as many of you are really saying, it should be around that 90th percentile. You don't need 98th percentile, I'll be very frank. For most of you, it's going to be around the 90th percentile. If you look at all the possible permutations and combinations, it has to be above the 80th percentile or so. So essentially, the theme of this webinar is about how do you get to that 90th percentile ability. And to do that, let's kind of understand what skills you need to get there, and to do that, let's kind of assess a few skills. Okay, so to do that, we're going to solve a few questions, and let me pause my video, and I'm going to move this poll over here. That way, we have some more clarity as to how we do this. Here is, before I do we solve the first question, I want you to click on this option choice which says still solving. Why do I do that? Because when you click on still solving, I know how many of you are still solving, and then when you choose another option choice, I know that you're done solving that particular question. That way we don't time you guys time yourself as a group. And then depending on the preparation level of the group, as a group, you may take longer to solve this question, or if you're very well prepared, as a group, you may take less time. I have about 125 students. Let's get to at least 80 people saying not solving. I mean, you guys are here spending your time, so might as well participate to get the most out of that time. 69 people, 71. Let's get to 80 people saying not solving. 75, 77, 78. And we have 80. Good. I'm going to remove broadcast results, and here is your first question. And you should solve this question using how you approach SC questions. So here. Right, guys, 80% of the class is done, and I'd appreciate if you could put in your answers um, uh, in another 10 seconds or so. That way, you guys still get to complete your thought process. 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll, and let's broadcast the results. So clearly, choice E is very popular. 50 of you chose choice E. Then the other choices that are popular are choices B, C, and D. Choice A, not so popular. I think it's just popular as the folks who said still solving. Now I'm going to bring back my video, hopefully, and let's start this. And what I want to really do is I want to really ask you, how did you approach this question? I mean, how did you go about narrowing it down to choice E? Or the fifth, about half of you chose choice E. How did you get it? How did you really decide that choice E is the correct answer? If you can put in your thoughts over here. Okay. Parallelism, ing modifiers, gut feeling, all right. Than is used, so the two entities should be similar. By eliminates A and B. Ing modifiers, okay. Let's kind of get a few more answers, but I think the nice thing about having this about 130 odd people in this webinar is that you get to see how others think, and 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 then you get to really see where people make mistakes. Now, by the way, this is not an e-GMAT question. This is an official question. This is from the advanced official guide. So let's kind of really see this. How many of you think choice E is correct? Because 50% of you chose choice C, and how many of you think choice E is correct? All right, but 62% of you think choice E is correct. That's a big vote of confidence. Let's kind of go forward. It is so essentially, and you guys read what thought process you said. So what the way people go about doing this is they look at this question and they say, man, there's a portion of the sentence that is underlined, and they really say, hey, look at the answer choices. Let's do a vertical scan, and 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 then you see there's a 2-3 split. There's a by over there in C, D, and E, and there's no, the word by is not present in choices A and B. That's the first thing. So they said let's kind of make a decision what needs to happen between these two sets of choices. And they look at this and they look at the parallelism piece and they say sentence the non-underlined portion has let's just go over there, has a by over here. This means the underlined portion should have a by over here. So essentially they go and do C, D, E, and then they say, hey man, choice C looks very weird, and then they reject choice C, and then they decide which of D and E is correct, and they say end of seems better than ending, and they choose choice E. Right. You guys wrote something similar, right? That's how you guys wrote this. Now, yeah, right. Now, tell me, why do you need an MBA to do this? Right. Why do you need the guy who makes 150 grand, who's potentially going to make 150 grand a year post his MBA, to kind of do what a computer can do? What critical thinking was used here? What you used was pattern recognition and some grammar rules. Okay, which is why choice E is incorrect. We're going to see why that is the case. The result of this is, when you narrow it down to choice E over here, you make a mistake. Half of you made a mistake just right then and there. You knew all the grammar rules. I mean, you didn't make a mistake with grammar. There's absolutely no grammatical error in choice E. It is perfect from a context of grammar. Okay, but it is not the correct choice. Now, this is not my question. This is an official question. Okay, the GMAT says choice E is incorrect, and let's see why do they say that. But even before we get to the explanation, that one takeaway that I want to seed in your mind, and you may not agree with it right now, but you kind of make note of it. This is an advanced question. If you're a 90th percentile guy, you're likely going to see questions like this. Number one. Number two, this is tagged by the GMAT as a grammar-based question. This is not my tagging. This is their tagging. And yet you knew all the grammar and made a mistake. 50% of you made a mistake. Okay, why? Because you chose the splits and pattern recognition method, which, by the way, a 90th percentile guy needs to go beyond that. Yes, you need to know the rules. Yes, you need to see the splits. Why? It makes decision making easier. But if you stop over there, you're not going to get to that 90th percentile. So let's solve this using what we call as the meaning-based approach, which, by the way, is the method we use to solve easy, medium, and hard questions. So what's going on over here? This is a long sentence, and to make sure that you understand the meaning, you've got to read slowly. Now, this part over here is written in a small font, but it's really important because it tells you what to do. If you know what to do, doing that is not so difficult. This isn't rocket science over here. Okay, so the author says the overall slackening of growth in productivity. Okay, so there's a slackening or a slowing of growth is influenced. All right, so you say, okay, the growth in productivity is influenced by what? Less by government regulation. And you see the tab over here, which is to really say, I've made a pause over there after his influence, because that seems like a natural stopping point to stop and understand what the author is saying. And what the author is saying is that slackening of growth is influenced less by government regulation although that is significant for specific industries. So what does this that refer to? Whenever you see a pronoun over here, you need to make sure that you kind of have a fair idea of what it refers to. And in this case, that refers to, let me actually see if I can note this, that refers to this government regulation over here. Let's make a nice arrow. Okay. Even though what is that government regulation is significant for specific industries like mining, than, and here's a comparison, than the coming to an end of a period of rapid growth in agricultural productivity. So when you think about what the author is really saying, there are essentially three aspects to this sentence. One is the sentence explains, what are the factors behind the reduction in growth in productivity. The second aspect is that the said reduction happens by two things, or happens because of is influenced by two things. And what are those two things? One is government regulation, and the fact that a period of rapid growth in agricultural productivity is that coming to an end. It's coming to an end. And then aspect three is there's a comparison. It's impacted less by government regulation and than by coming to this end of period. Let's kind of get a simple yes no. When you were reading this question, how many of you understood these aspects? How many of you understood all of these three aspects? Half of you did. Or about 40% of you understood or each one of these three aspects. That is really good. Let's kind of get another data point. And again, that's kind of where what I call as I won't call it the wisdom of the group, but the insights of a group are very, very useful. So which aspect do you think were you not able to understand? And you, in the poll that I'm going to really show, you're going to see aspect 1, aspect 2, 1, 2, 2, aspect 3, and then none. So 2.1 is government regulation, 2.2 is this, and aspect 3 is the comparison. Which aspect were you not able to understand? So aspect 1 is the fact that the sentence explains factors behind reduction in growth of productivity. Aspect 2 and 2.1 is government regulation, and 2.2 is the fact that the period of rapid growth in agricultural productivity is coming to an end. And aspect 3 is the fact that 2.2 has more impact than 2.1. All right. This is a multiple answer question. Each one of you could have chosen more than one answer. So you can really see the impact over here. And a good chunk of you faltered in either 2.2 or in aspect 3. I'm going to show each one of the options again. So let's kind of identify the errors in the original sentence. And what you really see is the word by is missing. That's the only error over here. Okay. So there's a parallelism error. Other than that, the sentence seems fine to me. Okay, now let's analyze the answer choices. Let's kind of go there. Now, again, choice A and B are off. You have by missing. Now, the correct answer is choice C. Why is choice C the correct answer? Because it maintains the original meaning and it corrects the parallelism error. That was as simple as that. If you understood the original meaning, the moment you came to choice C, you said, this seems absolutely perfect. It maintains the meaning and it actually corrects that parallelism error that was there. And that's my answer. What happens in choice D? Can someone tell me? What happens in choice D? Why is choice D incorrect? It's a change in meaning. There's no noun form or something. It's a change in meaning. The author in the original sentence really says it's impacted by the coming to an end of the period of rapid growth. Okay, which means that period of rapid growth is kind of, it's still rapid growth, but it's coming towards an end. Whereas choice D and E say that it is by the end of that period. So that position towards the end. Okay. And because of that distortion in meaning, these choices are incorrect. Why is meaning really important for a manager? Because what do? As a manager, you communicate. When you motivate, you communicate, and you cannot distort what you're trying to communicate. You have to be absolutely unambiguous. Okay. And what choices D and E really say is that reduction happens by the final part. I'm going to show the results once again. How many of you, what percentage of the class got it right? Only about 13%. Okay. What percentage of the class knew the grammar? Probably 60%. There's a difference that focusing on meaning can bring about. It's not about the grammar. It's not about the splits. It's about the meaning. Okay. So what's the takeaway? When you're reading the original choice that's given to you, understand the meaning that it's trying to communicate. More often than not, that meaning would be clear. There will be times when that meaning is not clear, but you'd always be able to infer what the author is trying to communicate. Do not distort that. Okay. The other piece which I want you to take away from this is the moment you understand the meaning, you focus on the correct choice, your decision path is absolutely clear. If you give meaning as the importance that it's supposed to give you, if you give grammar the importance, if you give concision the importance, you get confused, which is kind of what happened. And there's a reason why this is a part of the advanced group over there. Mayur says, during the exam, I can't focus on meaning. Is there any approach to focus on meaning? You know, Mayur, we showed you how when you're reading the sentence, you spend more time. If you spend more time reading the sentence, you're going to focus on meaning. What else are you going to do when you're reading the original sentence? And it's a behavioral change. That's how you have to really do. Again, the way to succeed on the exam is to practice the way you would approach the exam, or to not approach the exam any differently than how you practice. If you think they're two different things, then you're not going to get the same results that you get during practice. You always thought SC is about grammar, and then someone really said, Shrikant, please pose your question in the Q&A pod, because this pod is for me to get information from you. But if you think, if you thought that SC was about grammar, then you should also think that your boss should know better grammar than your English teacher. Which I don't know why should your boss know better grammar than your English teacher, or your boss's boss, or his or her boss. How do you do this in 2 minutes? You do this in actually 60 seconds. Once this becomes a natural habit to you, you don't even need 2 minutes. You don't even need 90 seconds. Forget about 2 minutes. But it is about you making this a habit. Okay. The observations from Q1 that you have is using splits and grammar, you could reject two choices. That's a good way. I mean, you got two choices off, but without meaning, you were confused. You're going to toggle between choices. Ultimately, time would run out and you're going to say, let me choose this. Why? Because this seems more concise. Okay, and I'm going to show all of this. I'm going to solve more questions and you're going to see the entire method. And this entire method is also there on our portal, and it's demonstrated close to 400 times. So don't worry about it. And it's the same method. Every question, identical method. Step 1, step 2, step 3 are all going to be the same. There's no different method for a modifier question and a different method for a verb to insist question and a different method for a parallelism question. In fact, that doesn't really happen on the test. It's the same method. So we're going to follow the same exercise. Um, we're going to solve question 2, and this time, one thing that I'm going to urge you to do is I'm going to urge you to follow the meaning-based approach while solving question 2. But again, like we did in the previous question, let's click on still solving so that I know how many of you are still solving, so that I don't time you guys as a group, and that wisdom or that collective knowledge of this entire group times you. Okay, let's get 80 people to say still solving. 72. Let's get to 75. And okay, we got 76. Here's your timer over here. I'm going to stop my video. And here is the question. Long question. Read slowly and then understand the meaning and then see what makes sense. All right, guys, 80% of the class is done. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So let me, man, I had not removed broadcast results. And no one told me. Sorry about that. But so this is a difficult question, and I think there's definitely a bias because you guys chose choice B, which indeed is the correct answer, but this is typically statistically a more difficult question. Tameka says, should I be seeing a timer somewhere? Tameka, you see the notes pod over here at the bottom right hand corner. You should be seeing a timer over there. But if I make the mistake again, please let me know. So I was thinking, man, you guys started following the meaning-based approach. We're done with the session because 65% of you got it right. But all right. And Anand says everyone is focusing on the question. Nobody noticed the broadcast. Yes. Well, thank you, Anand. And then that makes me really happy, by the way. So how did you approach this question? What was the first thing that you noticed about this question as you read this? What was the first thought that happened when you started reading this question? Okay. Broke it down, focus on understanding meaning. That's good. The meaning seemed lost in the original sentence. Absolutely, it did. That's good. The sentence was very complex. Yes, it was. And then you had to make sense of what the author was trying to say. So unlike the previous question, where only a small portion of the sentence was underlined, in this question, the entire sentence was underlined. And what happens when you get a completely underlined sentence? What happens when you get a completely underlined sentence? You actually give the author a lot of latitude, or you give the test maker a lot of latitude as to how to craft these answer choices. Splits actually go away. Okay, so when you think about dissimilarities or similarities that you were able to find in the answer choices, were you able to find any? No, there were none. There were none. There were none obvious ones. Of course, if you dig deeper, if you understand the meaning, you're going to find those things. But on a pure computerized way to really find the similarities and dissimilarities, or in other words, if I did a plagiarism check on the answer choices, I'd get no plagiarism. Okay, so let's kind of look at how would we approach this? And the key thing about this is once you see how to approach this using the meaning-based approach, you're going to find that the correct answer is fairly simple. So it's an e-GMAT question. Okay. And again, one of the things which a lot of people really know is it's a completely underlined question. Most often than not, you've got to start with meaning. And so let's kind of look at this and see how would you strategically approach a question such as this one. So the first word that you see over here, what does it indicate? What does the first word indicate? It says because diegetic music, and you see the word because, and you really say, man, there has to be a cause and effect. And let me actually make this use a better annotation. You see the first word because, and you say there has to be a cause and effect. Why? Because always has to have a cause and effect. The word cause means there has to be an effect. Because you ran, you'll likely weigh less today. So there's a cause and effect. If I wrote a sentence that says because you ran and ended it, do you think that will be a complete sentence? It'll really communicate a complete thought? No. When you use the word because or use the word since, you're going to have a cause and effect or a fact and a claim over there. Does that make sense for those of you who says why when you see the word because you would have a cause and effect? Okay, so because diegetic music and I'm going to use DM, just makes things easier. Because DM or some form of music, and then you say actively referenced in film rather than confined to the background. And again, look at how we are breaking this down. And the way we are breaking this down is also kind of breaks down in my mind automatically when I read it. Because DM actively referenced in film rather than confined to the background, uh, invoking a sense of verisimilitude. I can't really pronounce that. I'm going to call it VS, some sort of a sense, in other words. So when you think about this and you say this word invoking, this word has to refer to what? When you think about it reading logically, what should this refer to? It should refer to DM over here, right? Uh, Diegetic music, yes. And again, for those of you who missed my cue, I'm going to just write this over here. We're going to call diegetic music as DM. Let's kind of place this nicely. Okay. So because then DM invoking a sense of VS or verisimilitude, the idea, and what is verisimilitude? Verisimilitude, it's the idea that art can express a truthful version of reality. Now it explains what that is, so I don't really need to worry about it. Filmmakers creating period dramas use it often. Okay, so essentially, there are three aspects that are there in this original sentence. I'm not even looking for errors right now. I'm just looking for what does the sentence talk about, and that's something which is really important because don't go about looking for errors right away. Go about figuring out what is the sentence talking about. So it says there's the three aspects that the sentence talks about. Aspect one, feature of DM presented. Um, okay, and it's what is that feature? It's referenced actively instead of being stuck to the background. And there's a second aspect. DM invokes a sense of VSM or VM. And aspect three is filmmakers who create historical dramas, period dramas or historical dramas, use what often? This it refers to DM. Okay, so that's kind of what the author wants to say. Okay, right now as we are doing this, do the three aspects make sense? Okay, so again, you have a very clear understanding of the cause and effect. So what is the causal relationship? The causal relationship is because when you think about all the possible things, you say, hey, there's a causal relationship that has to be there. So what is that causal relationship? The cause is because of aspect 2, because DM invokes a sense of VSM, filmmakers who create period dramas use DM often. So essentially, the logical causality is because aspect 2, aspect 3. Okay. Now that we know this, let's kind of figure out the errors in the original sentence. And but before that, if you casually read this, you're not going to be able to get to this. Okay. Um, and this is a wordy sentence. So there is what I call as modulating how you read when you see something like this. And what is that modulation? You see this and you say this is a wordy sentence. So read slowly. Read actually more slowly than you usually would. Why? Because this is something that's going to present a challenge. When you read more slowly, you assimilate more frequently while reading, you're going to figure out, hey, there is a cause and effect. What is that cause and effect? And then you're also going to be able to figure out what are the errors, which is what we're going to go to next. Okay, so let's kind of look at the errors over here. And we really say, hey, because DM and invoking a sense of verisimilitude over here, or VSM, there is no verb for this, so there's a subject verb error. And then when we look at this filmmakers over here, what starts to happen is this just seems to be some sort of a jump over there, and those are the two errors that I need to go about and fix. So let's look at choice B now. Choice B is at the bottom over here. You guys can really see that. Okay, choice B is what 65% of you chose, and choice B is indeed the correct answer. And what does choice B do? It says actively reference in the film rather than confined to the background. What is actively reference in the film rather than confined to the background? It's DM, so that modifier reference is absolutely correct. Is often used by filmmakers creating period dramas because the cause and effect that's used by them because it invokes a sense of, so the verb error is corrected over here, of VSM. What is VSM? The idea that art can express a truthful version of reality. That modifier placement over here is perfect as well, which makes this answer choice perfect. So aspect 1 is correct, aspect 2 is correct, the causality is correct, which makes this the correct answer choice. Okay. Now, those of you who were confused with choice C. Some of you were confused with choice C. Okay. Why is choice C incorrect? The causality is incorrectly placed. Yes, the causality is incorrectly placed. When you look at this, let's kind of read this. Filmmakers creating period dramas and often use diegetic music, which invokes a sense of VSM. Again, you can really say which part is not the most precise construction, but on the GMAT, it's not as strict about grammar. It's more precise about meaning, which invokes a sense of VSM. What is VSM? The idea that art can express a truthful version of reality. So this modifier placement is correct because it is actively referenced in the film rather than confined to the background. Okay, what it says is that essentially it reverses the causality. Okay, what it's really saying is because it is actively referenced in the film, what could it is only referred to DM. It goes to DM. There's not a whole lot of ambiguity over here. Okay, but it reverses the causality. So what is the original causality? DM invokes a sense of VSM, and because of which filmmakers use it actively. Okay, here what it's saying is because it's actively referenced, it invokes a sense of VSM. Okay, the causality is not okay, but from aspect 1, aspect 2, aspect 3, it's fine. I mean, it's more or less fine, and which is why choice C is incorrect. Jonathan says, and it's a great question that Jonathan has. It says, is there an exception to giving more weight to meaning than grammar? So good point, and I'm glad you asked that question, Jonathan. And please ask the question in the Q&A part. It allows me to figure out who asked this question. So there are certain clear grammar rules which cannot be violated. I mean, the subject verb rule that you saw, the modifier ambiguity rule, which again adds into meaning. And as we go and solve more questions, you're going to really see that the grammar is a tool to communicate meaning. As long as grammar is communicating the meaning unambiguously, you're fine. And you're going to really see that again and again. But is there an exception? The exception is things which are considered absolutely wrong, A, and things that make the meaning ambiguous. So, and the thing which is there is those of you selected choice C, had you not inferred the causality from the original answer choice, you would have selected choice C. I'm not going to go through choice D. There's no one selected choice D. Now, what's wrong with choice E? Choice is actually, when you read it independently, it reads just fine. DM, actively referenced in film rather than confined to the background, invokes a sense of VSM. What is VSM? The idea that art can express a truthful version of reality, and filmmakers creating period dramas use it often. Grammatically, absolutely perfect. What's the problem here? No, what's the problem? There is no causality. The causality is missing. But if this were an independent sentence, grammatically, There's absolutely no problem. Okay, the word and removes that causality over here. There's no since, there's no because, which are kind of replaceable things for causality. There's no run on. Those who say run on after the end, no. The grammatical aspects are perfect. Which, those of you saying independent clause makes no sense, then please put your question in the Q&A pod and you'd get a specific answer with as to which independent clause makes no sense. From a grammar standpoint, it is perfect. DM invokes, there's a subject verb pairing perfect, and this is a perfect clause independently. DM invokes a sense of VSM. What is VSM? The idea that art can express a truthful version of reality, and filmmakers, what kind of filmmakers? Creating period dramas, use it often. Yeah, if it's so instead of and, it would be correct. Then you'd have the causality. Or if you'd, and hence, so, yes. But, and that's kind of where meaning is important. Okay. So, what takeaway should you have from all of this? If you don't get 100% understanding of what the author is trying to communicate, as questions get more complex, you're going to face issues. You may know all the grammar in the world, but if you don't pair that grammar with meaning, you're not going to be able to select the correct answer with 100% certainty. If you can't do that, you get confused. You kind of carry this on to the next answer choice, and you don't want to do that. All right, let's go forward. So, second question was an e-GMAT question. It's actually based on an official question. You figured out splits were not possible. Two choices C and E were grammatically correct, but there were meaning change. Choice B was the absolute correct. So the three answer choices which grammatically were correct, but only one of them communicated the correct meaning, which was choice B, and that was the correct choice. If you think about the grammar rules required for this, very, very fundamental grammar rules. But if you look at the sophistication of sentence structure that is of understanding of that sentence structure that is required to get to this, then that's very sophisticated, and which is kind of what GMAT-SC is all about. Now, where do you learn how to read a long sentence like this? Master comprehension, yes, in the master comprehension course, we start with a 2-word sentence and extend it to an 80-word sentence, and we tell you how is that sentence built. And that's the reason why this course was created as a foundation, as a prerequisite to even starting the sentence correction or the critical reasoning or the reading comprehension aspect. So, Francisco says, on a scale of 1 to 10, and how much grammar is important in sentence correction? So, Francisco, that's again a good question, and on a scale of 1 to 10, it's about necessary versus sufficient. It's not on a scale whether grammar is not important and meaning is important, and you can ignore grammar. But do you need to learn, all sorts of complex grammar to be able to use GMAT sentence correction? No, you need to have the fundamentals. You need to have your fundamental blocks starting from subject, verb, verbs, pronouns, and modifiers and parallelism, and you need to understand the core concepts over there. You need to know what are the 2 or 3 ways in which verb ing forms can be used, and so on and so forth. But and if you look at that, you get a sort of a matrix of grammar rules. But when you know grammar rules, are you able to solve difficult questions just by knowing them? What we demonstrated just now is no, you can't. Why? Because When those grammar rules are intertwined by complex meaning, that's when the complexity starts to really go up. And that, once you learn the grammar rules, along with that, you need to really understand how the test makers actually intertwine that complexity. Okay, Tameka says it's a great question. What does 25% mean? What 25% meant was that A, the 25% of the sentence was underlined over there. And when that was the case, you were able to reject two answer choices correctly. Thank you, Tameka. That's a great question. Thank you for pointing that out. Um, okay. Vanessa has a really great question as well. She says, when I'm doing this on my own, should I be rewriting the sentence on a piece of paper with acronyms and try to do a three-step process in my head? Really great question. I'm so glad you asked this. So, yes, the simple answer is yes. If you're feeling the need, do this. And what's going to happen, Vanessa, is as you do this more and more, your brain will tell you to do this less and less as you solve more questions. And that's a natural progression of learning. So yes, do it if your brain's telling you to do it. And we did it when we were learning ourselves. So it's a very human way of learning. Now let's get to our third question. And thank you for those excellent questions. I mean, these are really great questions. It tells me that you're following along. It tells me things that you still have doubts with. And I'm sure if you have a question, if you have a doubt, others do as well. So bring on those intelligent questions. And we are on question number 3. Let's kind of look at still solving. And this time, I promise I'm going to remove broadcast results. And do point out if I don't. All right, 59. Let's get to 75 again, guys. Not so still solving. I'm going to put in the notes part, the timer over here once again. Let's move it back to 0% done. 2 more people, and then I show the question. 1 more. 3, 2, and 1. Let me remove broadcast results. Here is the question. Guys, 80% of you are done. Please put in your answers. 3, excuse me, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. And I'm going to broadcast the results. So, now, about 37-38% of you got it right. But you know what makes me so happy about this is that when it comes to the meaning aspect, 75% of you got it right, which is really exciting, frankly, over here. Why? Because essentially, very few of you chose choices A or B or C. That was great. So. This is an official question. It's not an e-GMAT question. It is also from the advanced OG advanced books. It is a 700 level question. So let's kind of look at this. I'm going to use the wisdom of this group to figure out why how you approach this. Tell me, when you read the original answer, when you read the original sentence, what kind of triggered a thought process, or what thought process did you have? Okay, it made zero sense. A distorted sentence. All right. So let's kind of use the e-GMAT approach to solving this question. Many of them chisel, and some of you are saying many of them you couldn't really figure out what that is, and then that's actually not wrong. But yes, it does throw you off. So many of them chisel from rocks centuries ago, from solid rock centuries ago. The mountainous regions of northern Ethiopia are dotted with hundreds of monasteries. Okay, so from a grammatical standpoint, is there anything grammatically wrong with this modifying the mountainous region? From a grammatical standpoint, no, there's nothing wrong. Many of them chiseled from solid rock centuries ago. If you look at pure grammar, what is chiseled from solid rock centuries ago? The mountainous regions, right? It's a modifier from a grammar standpoint. That's absolutely fine. Okay. The logic part, we'll again look at it once again, but from a pure grammar standpoint, it just seems fine. You know, mountainous regions could be chiseled by something. Okay. Now, many of them chiseled from solid rock centuries ago. The mountainous regions of northern Ethiopia are dotted with hundreds of monasteries. Monasteries, man. Um, so when you think about this, there are three aspects over here. Mountainous regions of northern Ethiopia are discussed. The second aspect is these regions were chiseled from solid rock uh, 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 centuries ago. And aspect 3 is that these regions are marked with hundreds of monasteries. Logically, why is that not fine? And we'll address that person who says dangling modifier. We're going to really see why that's not a dangling modifier. But logically, uh, why is this not fine? Why is this logically not fine? What is this trying to indicate? No, but logically. Let me actually put in a note over here. I'm going to put a dotted by earths all over What's wrong with this sentence? Dotted by earths all over, the oceans were huge. What's wrong with this sentence? Yeah, earths, or let's call it, if you want to make it planets all over. Yeah, it should be the opposite, right? Why? Because you don't have planets and oceans. You have oceans and planets, right? It's absolutely opposite. Grammatically, there's nothing wrong in it. Okay, it's modifying the right thing from a grammar, pure grammar sense. In the same way, you don't make mountains out of rocks. You make, mountains are made up of rocks. Rocks don't make mountains from a logical standpoint. In other words, and again, in other words, if I, instead of solid rock, had I really said, many of them chiseled, and I'm going to really type this, many of them chiseled by winds centuries ago. Okay. The mountainous regions. Would there be anything wrong with this? No, because winds do chisel mountains. In fact, winds and all that erosion and everything chisel those things chisel mountains. And that's kind of where you need to understand the meaning. Okay, so grammatically, and that's where the distinction between grammar and meaning needs to be very solid. Okay. Is aspect 2 logical? No, it's not. Why? Because rocks don't make mountains. I mean, you don't kind of chisel a rock and say, man, there is a mountain here now. No, many rocks constitute a mountain. What should I, if you don't understand the word chisel itself? In that case, it's one of those exceptional cases, and I'm really sorry in that case. It's one of those words that you should know. And in that case, that's where you practice and you really say these are the words that the test is going to have over there. And that's where you practice the official questions or the question on the e-GMAT platform, and you really say this is going to cover all the grammar. You don't get a ton of grammar a ton of vocab on the GMAT, but you get a bit of this, and 90% of the test taking population understands this. And it's okay if you don't understand it while you're preparing for it, but as you're preparing, you see these words, make a point to really make note of it. That's all I can say. And you're going to see a couple of these things, and you're going to see a few of these things in CR. You're going to see a few of these things in RC, and a few of these things in SC as well. But again, do you need to do something to prepare for your vocab? No. Okay. And in some ways, and this who says, Tameka says, it's almost like diegetic music. Tameka, thank you for that. I think you're right. If you understand that rocks don't make mountains, or mountains are not made from a rock, but vice versa. And again, I had no idea. I still have no idea what DM is as well. So logically, what you should say is that the monasteries were chiseled from solid rock. That's the only logical aspect that can make sense. Okay. So again, what's your takeaway? This is an official question, and the official guide calls it a communication-based question. So this is their tagging, and you can really see why it's a communication-based question. Okay, it uses a higher sense of figuring out what the author is trying to say. Okay, so let's kind of figure out the errors in the original sentence. There's a logical error. All right. And so the modifier by itself is not kind of modifying the right thing in that case. From that logic part, yes. So let's look at choice B. Choice B says chiseled from solid rock. Again, it maintains uh, that error, which is aspect 2, the logical aspect over here. You can really see this part as a part of aspect 2 over here, that the which is not there, and hence you kind of reject choice B. And there's also many hundreds. There's a slight redundancy. You don't need many with hundreds. I'm actually going to show you how you guys polled over here. D and E is where you were confused, which I mean makes me really happy. Choice E says hundreds of monasteries, many of them chiseled from solid rock, okay, are dotting the mountainous regions of Europe. So essentially, this one corrects the logical aspect. Why? Because it puts chiseled modifying, it makes that chiseled modifying the monasteries. But what it also says is that these monasteries are still dotting the mountainous regions, means they're kind of still spreading across the mountainous regions of northern Ethiopia. So it corrects that, but R dotting implies that the action is still going on, and which is not what the original meaning was. And again, here you see a verb tense error, but how do you figure out that that's an error? Because it distorts what the author intended to say. So here again, you see meaning is central, and you need to know those tenses. But if you don't understand the intended meaning, you can't really apply those grammar forms over here. Choice D again uh, is very similar. It says the mountainous regions of northern Ethiopia are dotted with hundreds of monasteries, many of which are chiseled from solid rock centuries ago. Are chiseled again talks about a present action, whereas what the author intended was past, since the action really happened long time back. Those of you who chose choice D, a number of you chose choice D. Do you understand that? Okay, and choice E, which is about 35% or 38% of you chose, uh, uh, corrects that error. It's again in many ways similar to choice D, but it corrects the R part, which is that they're not currently dotting. It's not actually, the action is not happening right now, and and because of which choice E is the correct answer. Okay. So a possible faulty thought process, and again, I don't know how many of you did this, but I want to demonstrate that because in the past we've seen people do this, and that's kind of where I say the wisdom or the knowledge base or the experience of the group comes in handy over here. People really say, hey, the meaning of choice A is okay, it looks a bit weird, and many of them chiseled is something that people really don't like seeing over here, and they reject choice A on that, and they say B conveys the same meaning as A. It has much better structure, and they mark B as the correct answer. Now, not many of you did that. Only 6 of you marked choice B, but probably 6 of you who went on to mark choice B is how you approached why choice B is the correct answer, and you can kind of see the mistake that you guys made. Okay. Um, Again, what's the takeaway from here? Sometimes you have to question what the author is telling you to really figure out whether it's logical, and you don't take things on face value. You have to assimilate the meaning, okay, and then move forward. If you don't spend that time assimilating the meaning and move forward, you're going to get confused in the answer choices. All right. Now we're going to go to the last question for the day. Question number 4. And you guys know the drill. You have to select still solving. Again, the splits were misleading. Choice A was grammatically incorrect, as well as it also provided a logical meaning. And again, the takeaway from this is you needed an understanding of meaning to get to the correct answer. All right, 70 people still solving. Can I get that, please? Now, I know many of you are making mistakes, and I think I got this. Um, I'm gonna remove broadcast results. But before I get to the next question, I want to ask this: is this more fun than just studying grammar and trying to remember all those complex terms? Right? It's more fun. This is logic. We like logic, right? Yes, and that's kind of what I want you to really take away with you, and A, apply to the next question, and then B, um, as you solve questions beyond this webinar, as you go back and log on to the platform, solve the practice questions over there. As you log onto the platform, look at the concepts over there. Um, don't look at those concepts as just pure grammar, but as tools to convey the intended meaning. Once you start looking at grammatical concepts as means to convey what we want to convey, you're going to find that they are your friends. You're going to find that these are really nice things. Okay. And by the way, if your brain's pushing you, if you think that, man, my understanding is being stretched, that's when the synapses in your brain are trying to make those interconnects. That's good. That's good. When we stretch you on a logical front, that's when you're truly learning. When you really say, I've got to remember A, B, and C, that's when you're using the memory part of the brain. That's not what a manager needs to do. Memory today is cheap. Okay. Logic today is complex. And which is what we're trying to build over here. All right. Question number 4. Um, the other piece that I want to make sure that you do, I think, I'm sorry about that. Pyle wanted me to really push this part over here, which is that to be able to learn, I mean, you've solved 3 questions. There are things that you've learned from these 3 questions, way more than you probably learned from solving 10 questions prior to this. And the reason why you learned is because we reasoned every answer choice out. And there was that level of detail which says this is why this answer choice is definitely wrong. We didn't say this is better than that. We said this is definitely wrong. This is definitely right. How do you get that level of feedback? You need those answers. You need the solutions that provide that level of detail. Okay, and that's really important. And that's why even when you practice official questions, not just e-GMAT's own questions, but official questions we ask you to practice in our OG Scholar name, because you get good reasons as to why every other answer choice is incorrect. You wouldn't have been able to learn that meaning-based approach if those solutions, if those reasonings were not available. If you didn't know the word, what the word because really said. Okay. And which is why we actually write down all the steps. If you think about it, it's a lot of effort to put in this detail. But each of the about 800 odd SC questions that e-GMAT has created have been solved using this level of detail. Each of those 500 odd official questions that you see on the platform have solutions that we've created using this level of detail. So, question 4, OG Advanced. Here is your question. Guys, most of you are done, or rather 80+% of you are done. So let's get those answers in. 3, 2, and 1. Let's end the poll and let's broadcast the results. So it was a fun question, a real fun question over here, and I can really see from the stats over here that you guys truly tried to imbibe the meaning-based approach, and that makes me really happy. Now, choice D is the correct answer, and 35% of you got it. A lot of you chose choice B as well, and we're going to really look at why choice B is incorrect. But it's interesting. I mean, I saw the rate at which answers were coming in, and when people are following a similar approach, you see a certain pattern with which answers come in. You see how long people take to get those answers in, and I could see that similarity. So I'm really glad that that you guys are changing that approach from the very first question, and how you're approaching this. So let's kind of look at this over here. And this is, when I read this, it seemed like something which kind of I understood, but it also seemed like something was off. Okay, and let's kind of read this. A star will compress itself into a white dwarf. Okay, makes sense. A neutron star or a black hole. So there's a list. A star will compress itself into one of these three things after it passes through a red giant stage. Okay, depending on mass. And when I really see this over here and said depending on mass, I'm like, mass of what? This kind of doesn't seem seem correct to me. And so I kind of split this into how I would read this. A star will compress itself into A, B, or C after it passes through a red giant stage. And when I see depending on mass, and I say where do I put this? I could really put this at two places. In one is I could really say off, depending on the mass of the red giant stage, but then that's not, I couldn't really word it properly. But then as a modifier, I could only put that and really say this should logically modify this star over here. And that's something that I need to take away from this original sentence. And if you spend those few extra seconds reading that original sentence and not go and start looking at the answer choices, then you're going to find that you're able to get to this. How many of you struggle to do this? When you read the original answer choice, original sentence, and you really say, hey, I'm unable to figure out what the correct meaning is, what the precise meaning that the author is trying to really say. How many of you struggle to really prevent yourself from going to the answer choices? How many of you are able to really say, hey, I'm going to stop, I'm going to read that sentence again? No, I think my question wasn't worded as precisely. I think if you could really just, if your answers can be a bit more explicit, where you say, hey, I stop myself and don't look at the answer choices till I'm able to figure out what the author is trying to say, or it's a struggle. If I'm unable to figure out, I start reading the answer choices. You didn't stop. Some of you did, some of you didn't, and that's kind of where I think. Let me just actually put in a new poll question so that we get a fairly good answer over here. And did you stop? And yes, no. And I just made this, so again, there's no question mark or anything. So did you stop after reading the original sentence to make sure that you understood the complete meaning before you started reading the answer choices? And yay versus nay is what I'm asking. Okay, 3, 2, and 1. I'm going to end the poll. I'm going to broadcast results. 66% of you did stop, and it makes me happy. Why? Because you are starting to inculcate good habits, and that's what's good about it. When you start to inculcate good habits, you start to see results, and you start to see results coming in with an increasing pace. So we have this over here, and essentially what we see is what's wrong with the with various answer choices. A star, the first one we really said, hey, this is not modifying the right thing. Now choice B was very popular. Okay, 28% of you chose choice B. Choice B says after passing through the red giant stage, depending on its mass, okay, what is the problem with choice B? What could its mass refer to in choice B? Whose mass could it refer to? This word, its mass. Its mass could refer to the red giant stage. At the same time, it could also refer to the star. And I can't be certain, is it referring to this guy over here, the red giant stage, or is it referring to the star? And because there's no certainty, I can't really say whether choice B is correct. Okay, this is the 700 level question. So because of this ambiguity, that part, choice B is incorrect. Let's look at choice D. Okay, and see, is there any ambiguity over here? Mass determines whether a star, after passing, what is passing? The star is passing through the red giant stage, will compress itself. What does itself refer to? The star itself into a white dwarf, a neutron star, or a black hole. There's absolutely no ambiguity over there. It's communicating a logical meaning. No, it's clear. Mass of a star. Mass determines whether a star, after passing, who's making the action? The star is doing the action. The red giant is the stage. The red giant is a stage. Okay. Again, if you have further questions, please put them in the Q&A pod. You'd get much more specific answers over there. Okay. So what's wrong with choice C? After passing through the red giant stage, a star's mass. Is a star's mass passing through the red giant stage? No. Okay. Why is option E incorrect? Using the same logic, try and reason out option E. What does it refer to in option E? No. Mass of star. Who said that? Yes, Mudassar and Rajesh K. You guys are absolutely correct. Choice E says the mass of star after passing through. Mass doesn't pass through the red giant stage. Will determine whether it. What does it refer to? The mass of a star. Okay. It changes the subject, the doer, completely. Sorry about that, guys. So it changes the doer completely, and which is why this is incorrect. But once you get the meaning, again, the correct answer is absolutely clear. I mean, this it's clear what's correct and what's not. But you guys were confused with a few of the other answer choices, and you need solid reasons to really say why is how do I reject the choices that I'm confused with. Okay, now again, this is an official question. All right, this is how the test makers create these questions. Again, splits were not possible. Choice A uh, uh, gave you a meaning that was illogical. Okay, and again, it was 100% meaning over here that helped you get to the correct answer. Yes, when you looked at the other incorrect answer choices, there was the ambiguity with regards to what did it refer to in choice B, and which is where the grammar piece in some ways also helped you, but again, grammar plus meaning. Now, one of the things that I want to make sure you understand, and let me actually just go on over here and let's focus on the takeaways, is essentially, this is not about grammar or meaning. Okay, this is not about either one or the other. Okay, if you're someone who spent, and some of you have been asking me this question, hey, I've spent a ton of time preparing uh, GMAT sentence correction and I'm still not where I should be. And if you are in one of these categories, if you spend more than 25 hours preparing for SC, you should have gotten half these questions right. Okay. Um, and uh, do you feel that you are at that 90th percentile today? Some of you are saying no, and you guys, most of you are not. Otherwise, hopefully, you probably are not attending this webinar. You should be studying something else if you're already at 90th percentile. Okay, and yes, I'll be sharing the PDF over here. But one thing so if you're not at 90th percentile, and if you say, hey, I know the grammar, then one thing which is very clear is you need to marry meaning with grammar. You need to change how you approach questions. And once you do that, once you start focusing on the logical aspect of things, you're going to find that plateau, if you're stuck at that 40th, 50th, 60th percentile, that plateau goes away. You start to see much higher scores. Okay. Um, and to do that, you'd have to approach every question using the meaning-based approach. If you don't approach every question using the meaning-based approach, you're going to find that you'd struggle with questions when things start to become difficult, and you find the meaning-based approach isn't natural for you, and you're going to get stuck at that 60th percentile. And we don't want to do that. Why? Because frankly, getting stuck at 60th percentile gives you no ROI of your MBA. That's something that I will tell you today itself. And you're not alone in terms of people who've done this. And there are very smart people who get stuck at these scores. As an example of a guy um, who essentially really smart guy. He's an IS officer. If actually you Google his name, you're going to probably be able to hear his speeches. You're going to find he's a very well spoken person, very well read person overall. He was stuck at a 660 over there. Why? Because he knew every aspect of grammar. He had been a convent speaker, a convent studied student all throughout his life, and and when he got to that 700 level questions, he felt confused, and which many of you probably did during this webinar, where you kind of figure out, hey, multiple answer choices seem just as good. It's when he started focusing on that meaning-based approach, he was able to improve from that V32, and sentence correction was one thing that was stopping um, his progress to a V42, and this progress took about 20 days. Okay, so it's not that it took a ton of time to get there. It took a ton of approach, or rather a change in approach to get there. You can watch his interview over here when I share the PDF. You can get that. As an example of someone who's a native speaker of English language, and he was stuck at 700 again, sentence correction. He was stuck at about 64th percentile in sentence correction, and again he experienced a very similar thing, where he said once you can get to the easy and medium questions by purely focusing on grammar, and grammar was something that was second nature to him, or actually even first nature in many ways. But he says once you get to those difficult questions, that's when you've got to really, if you don't switch to that meaning-based approach, you're going to have an issue. So he had to change his entire approach to hit that 770 score. So Rahul, the strategy is not to really not focus on grammar, but the strategy is to follow the three-step approach where you say, I'm going to first understand what the author is trying to say. Then I'm going to really look at the errors in the original sentence. And to figure out those errors in the original sentence, you would require some grammatical rules, but not a ton of them. And then you really do the POE. If you really say, I'm going to focus as POE or splits as my primary technique, you're going to struggle. Okay, so and how do you figure out that meaning? That we saw as sentences became longer, we paused, we kind of really said what was the acting part, what was the subject, and what is that part doing. And when we saw all these modifiers, what were they referring back to? Where do we learn all of that skill? We learn that skill in master comprehension, and we continue to enhance that skill as you go through the sentence correction course. Okay, now let's talk about grammar. When you talk about grammar, right? So how many concepts do you learn in grammar? Probably 10, 12, 15, 20. And the reason is, if you look at pure grammar, you kind of have 6 or 7 modules, starting with verbs, pronouns, tenses, modifiers, parallelism, comparisons, and then a few idioms. Okay, but then when you marry meaning with grammar, you need to master 200 odd different combinations or so. Still the same grammar, but when you add meaning to it, when you look at the because piece of it, when you look at how sentences are constructed, it kind of ends up to about 200 concepts or so. When you're studying, what evidence do you have that you mastered these 200 concepts? I mean, for those of you who've been studying, what evidence do you have? It's a simple question. What evidence do you have that you mastered these concepts? Other than that, score comes towards the end. While you are studying, what evidence do you have? Okay, which quiz results? The piece which is really important is when you're studying, you need to know that what you're studying, you're actually getting it. Okay, and timing is not evidence. Okay, your understanding is not definitive evidence. It's a good piece of information. Yes, it's really important, but it is not evidence. It is not something that you can present and you can say, I am very, very certain that I know this. In other words, what evidence that you have that you've mastered these concepts? Verb ed modifiers, whether they're verbs or verb ed forms, whether they're verbs or modifiers. Can you distinguish between them? How are relative pronoun modifiers used? In what cases can noun modifiers modify slightly far away nouns? Noun modifiers don't just have to be next to nouns. Okay. In what cases does a verb ing modifier act as an action modifier, or in what cases does it act as a noun modifier? Okay. And so on and so forth. You need to have evidence that you in your brain can distinguish this when this comes on the test. By the way, this may seem like a lot of grammar to you. It isn't. It's all meaning. And the other question which you have is, where did you learn these concepts from? And what confirmation that those sources tell you that you learned all of these concepts? The key to hitting that 90th percentile is to getting feedback, achieving that level of perfection. And what is that perfection? Understanding the meaning and marrying grammar with it. And to do that, you need to really achieve that kind of perfection. You need to make sure you learn the concepts, you get feedback onto the areas that you've done well, and then focus on the areas where you still lack, and then go back and evaluate whether you've actually achieved that improvement or not. Uh, that divide and rule methodology in learning works really well. But the first thing is you have to look at meaning and grammar in combination. You can't just look at grammar and really say these are just the concepts. Meaning is integrated with those grammatical concepts. Okay. Um, when you learn this in the e-GMAT course, you engage with 500 plus examples. Okay. And these are examples plus practice questions. We track how you do this and we give you feedback 87 times. Each of these feedback points is personalized. When you watch a video, we collect about 6 data points every minute. And we aggregate that to build that feedback. When you and this is just learning those concepts and in that learn stage overall. And that's where you see when you learn these 200 concepts. This is not in the refine stage. This is not in the Excel stage. Okay. When you read them using a book, when you study the same thing using a book, you get about 8 to 10 feedback points. You don't really know where you're lacking. And then you won't know what your proficiency level is over here. So the other question that I want to ask you is, when did you learn how to apply these concepts? And that's a question that you need to ask. And the two options which is there is from the source that you're learning, after you learn the grammatical piece, or while you are learning. And ask yourself, if you're studying using a book, open that book and figure out, when am I learning how to apply? Okay, what source are you using to learn this? Okay, if you're using e-GMAT, you're getting that while learning, and that's something that's there. If you're using a book, most books will not teach you. Most books won't teach you concepts. Okay. Most books won't teach you. Most online courses won't integrate application. And I'll tell you why that is the case. When you're learning concepts, when you go through the e-GMAT course, you have application modules. So you have these conceptual modules which are there, but there's application part which is embedded right within these pieces over here. And the number of arrows that you see are the intensity of application that's there. What you rarely see is, depending on the width of the module, which is kind of the number of individual concepts that you rarely see over here, you have the intensity of application. And while learning, when you're doing this, you get feedback. When you go through the subject verb module, you get feedback whether you've learned subject verb well enough or not before you move forward. When you go through the verbs module, you get feedback whether you've learned verbs well enough before you move forward to pronoun. Then there's a progression that happens this way. Let me show this in action. When you're in the learn stage, if you're an e-GMAT student, you get 23 times, you get feedback on the application aspect 23 times. Each of these feedback points is personalized to you. Use that feedback. Because if you use it, you're going to find that there's no reason why you shouldn't succeed. Here's an example of a guy whose screenshots I'm going to really show. This is a subject verb module. You observe a few things over here. First of all, everything that you do is evaluated. When you study a concept, we evaluate how well you're doing. You get a score on it. We also track the amount of time you took. That's technology that we built from grounds up. Similarly, you can see this over here. More complex concepts, we can evaluate what an average person who gets to a 90th percentile spends. What is it that you are spending? We can compare what your starting ability was and how much time should you have spent. Okay. Now, what you see over here is this guy did not do as well in the application file. He will start application of subject verb right when he learned subject verb. By the way, he's already solved 20-25 questions over here. Yet he solved another set of application questions. He didn't do as well, but he spent a ton of time revising those solutions. As a result, right after that in the practice quiz, he did very, very well. Now let's go on to the verbs module. A bit longer module. You actually see that there are complex concepts. Verb sequencing is a complex concept. This guy spent a ton of time revising every question that was put at him over here. You see that 64 minutes and 7 seconds. He didn't do as well over here, but what he did was he bookmarked questions in verbs practice quiz, which is the one the last but one. He bookmarked. He made a mistake over here, and he can bookmark those questions so he can revise those questions. And because he bookmarked those questions, he spent time revising those questions. You can see in the official guides quiz over here, he got 100% score. And this is what in-place improvement leads to. Okay, again, we invest in building all of this technology, and again, because he took feedback seriously, he's able to get to a 730 in his first go. Okay. Now, those who excel, what do their feedback scores look like in the learning stage? These are, we analyzed 500 students who went through our course. We analyzed close to 3,000 points per student. And what we found was that during the learning stage, and this is just the sentence correction course, most people got but 70 or more positive feedback points. So in the entire learning stage of SC, you get 87 feedback points. So if you add these two columns, they would end up to 87. And most of them got 70 plus positive feedback points. But they also got corrective. Not everyone got everything correct in the first go. But the beauty of this was because they got corrective feedback right then and there, they incorporated it, because of which they were able to get to those scores of B40 or higher, which is 90th percentile. And that's really important. That feedback over here is really important. These scores, which are aggregate scores in concept files, aggregate scores in application files, these are really important. These are really telling whether you've learned stuff or not. Okay. So again, if you're aiming for that score of 730 or higher, make sure you use this feedback. Make sure you actually leverage that, do those revisions in place. And as you do that, you're going to find that following the meaning-based approach becomes second nature. You'd find that as you get into just practicing, you start with that 70th percentile, and just with practice from there on, hitting that 90th percentile would be fairly easy. What you see on this slide is how the median scores have changed, and which is why you ought to aim for that 730 plus. What you don't see on this slide are Harvard and Stanford, which by the way already have those 730 odds median scores in the year 2014. Again, some data over here. If you want to see some anecdotal data, I have a few examples of people who got to those high scores and got fellowships. I mean, Mansi, who's just graduating from Harvard, she got a $90,000 fellowship from a scholarship from Harvard. She's got a 770. Victor got a full ride from Ross and Keenan Flagler. Kong Bui didn't just get a full ride from Ohio Fisher and a bunch of other schools, but he also got $1,700 a month to study at Ohio Fisher. He just graduated 6 months ago. He's currently working over here. Similarly, a few more cases. Again, Nishant scored a 740. With a 690, he got rejects from everywhere. For the 740, he got an admit from Columbia. He also got a full ride from Ohio Fisher. Pravi, 80,000 scholarship from Georgetown with a 740. And Krishnakant got 3 full fellowships with a 720. With a 690 again, he got all rejects, not even admissions. And these 3 full fellowships were in round 3 of last year. And this is just a small subset of anecdotal data. If you go to our YouTube channel, you're going to see a much larger set of success stories. How, as people improved and went beyond that 730 score, they're not just their admits, but they received way more scholarships than they had imagined. So again, aim for that 90th percentile. master that meaning-based approach. And if you want to understand how different it is to study concepts, go take a look at the free trial. And you're going to really see how learning concepts is not just about grammar, how we marry meaning and grammar even when you learn concepts. And use those feedback points to excel. If you hit those feedback points and if you hit the scores that we recommend that you do, you're going to find that that there's a 95% or higher probability that you hit your target GMAT score, 95% or higher. And because we track all of this data. All right, with that, I want to thank everyone for joining me today. It was a pleasure hosting you. Uh, I frankly did this webinar for the first time. It's Payal who does this. Hopefully, I was able to do justice to this webinar. I'd here's a PDF, and I'd really like to get some feedback on that. I think Payal would like to get feedback on this webinar. This is her webinar in general. Okay. And if you have any other questions, then I'd be happy to take those on. Lokesh says, how do I improve writing? Will you help with that? So we don't help with your application. It's just we've not figured out a way to do it in a manner that we achieve the same kind of success with applications as we do with your admissions. So no, we don't help you with applications. But one thing that I will tell you is, and which is something that a lot of our students have really said is, as you improve your GMAT verbal, as you improve the reasoning aspect of it, you're going to find that you're able to write much better. Also, we work with some of the top admission consultants overall, and so once you get to that high GMAT score, we recommend the good ones to you. Okay. We also have a very active knowledge base. You know, we because we get so many students who go to top business schools, we get a lot of insights. So if you go to our blog, you're going to find a lot of insights that you probably won't see anywhere about business schools, about admissions, and so on and so forth. So, in fact, most questions that you have, if you Google e-GMAT plus those questions, you're going to find that you're going to get really good answers on our blog. And yes, Anand, I'll look forward to hosting more of these sessions. Is it advisable to do an MBA after 33? If you need to do an MBA after 33, then yes. Excuse me. So the thing which is there is okay, guys. No questions in the short answer pod, because two things. One is, if you have a question, for example, the question on is it advisable to do MBA after 33? I can share an article for you had you posted that question in the Q&A pod. I can't share an article in the short answer pod. So if you put your question in the Q&A pod, I'll give you references to it. You'll get answers to it. But if you put your question in the short answer pod, you just hear me speak verbally. You won't get good data and good references that you can keep with you. Okay. So Scholaranium score lower than score in custom quizzes. How do you improve? So first of all, make sure you have good reference scores that you need to hit in Scholaranium. Let me just get you. So let me get you some videos on data and methods, and here is a YouTube video that I'm going to give over to you. But if you look at this playlist, you're going to find a bunch of other videos that talk about data. So here is this video that should be popping in the Q&A pod right away. Is it advisable to do MBA after 33? The question is, do you need an MBA after 33? If you need an MBA after 33, then you need to justify that. We get a lot of students who do an MBA after 30. And let me share an article with you. It has links to other articles also. So that you should be able to get to. But essentially what B schools look for is, why do you need to do an MBA after 30 years of age. What incremental value can an MBA add? If you can justify that, and if you can also justify that adding that value would get an ROI, you're golden. Um, but I think in 2017, yeah, I shouldn't say 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I visited UCLA Anderson, and the oldest guy in their full-time MBA class was 47 years of age. Ravi says, I haven't started preparing, and what should be my starting point? Ravi, take a Sigma X mark, then go create your personalized study plan. And the Sigma X mark will give you your starting abilities. It's the only mark in the world that can give you all of that. Essentially, there are two ways to figure out your starting abilities. One, take the actual GMAT and then spend, 25 bucks ordering the ESR, or take the Sigma X mark. Michelle says, I'm 46, I'm upgrading my career as a manager. Does an MBA make sense for me? Michelle, I think the two or three ways of looking at it. So 46 is old. There's a chance an MBA would make sense for you. There is also a pretty high chance an MBA. There are alternatives that could help you over there. So the first question that B schools would have is, why not a part-time or an executive MBA? If you're 46, if you're working for a company, there are times when a company would fund part of that, and then that's kind of one option that you could take. And part-time MBAs definitely are older. But if you're looking for a career transformation, you need to show that passion, that you are invested in this, and then that career transformation will give an ROI that would make sense. It's a difficult sell, but it's a possible sell, is what I would say. So I'm not going to sugarcoat anything to you, but again, if you're passionate about it, and if you think a full-time MBA makes more sense than an executive or a part-time MBA, or even an online MBA, which you could do while you're working full-time, then definitely yes, as long as you can justify that. Anurag says, will I be able to improve my score to 700 with the help of e-GMAT if I'm at 550? So Anurag, here is where, when you think of a problem, and I see a couple of other questions which are here, which kind of pertain to a similar thought process. When you think of 550 and you think of 700, don't think of that 150 point as the problem. That's not addressing the causality. The causality is, that score of 550 is composed of multiple smaller abilities, and you need to improve on each one of those abilities. And yes, if you work on it, you'd be able to do that. Just as many of you have been able to actually get over there. Let me share some examples to make my point. So here's an example of a guy who has been able to improve from a 570 to a 740. So, where did my... So here's an example of a guy who's been able to improve from 570 to a 740. This guy is currently studying at Columbia. Now, if you think about how he approached all of this, he said, my SC ability, I need to improve from 35th percentile to an 80th percentile. My CR ability, I need to improve from X to Y. Now, some people who are at 650 need to improve only 3 or 4 abilities, but that extent of improvement on that individual subsectional level is very similar to what you would need. It's just that they don't need to improve on that many subsections. They probably know number properties, they know algebra, they're probably good in RC, but they do need to improve in SC and CR. So their task doesn't require as many hours. In your case, it requires more hours, but the kind of improvement you're seeking and the kind of improvement they are seeking in that individual subsections is very similar. So if they can do it, so can you. EC says, I've spent 80 plus hours on SC and I'm still very slow. Most of my wrong answers are grammatically correct, but change the meaning. I feel pressured by time and I don't feel I have adequate time to understand the meaning. How do I get it all under 2 minutes? Okay. So EC, first of all, I think there has to be some context to what you're really saying, because when I read the entire sentence, the question that you have, there are two inferences that I could take. One is that you're bad in SC despite having spent 80 hours. The second is you can solve questions, but essentially you take longer. Now, let's say it's the latter. Let's say you can solve questions, but you take longer. I think then in that case, let's kind of focus on the causality, because you're doing things right. It's just that you're taking longer. Now, we really need to focus on which step are you taking longer at. Are you taking longer to understand the meaning? Are you taking longer to figure out the errors? Are you taking longer while doing the POE? Usually it's not number three. Usually it's one or two. If you're taking longer to understand the intended meaning, which thank you for that feedback, then in that case, let's kind of even drill it down. So take 10 sentences where you took longer to understand the meaning. Ask yourself these three questions. How many times did you read the sentence? If you had to read the sentence 3 times, then you were reading the sentence too fast. Then you have to slow down. Again, it's about peeling that onion. It's about getting to that causality. Usually, once you figure that causality out, solution doesn't take that long. So step one, figure out those 10 sentences where you took longer. Not more than 10, not less than 10. 10 is a nice representative number. And then said, ask yourself, how many times did I have to read the sentence to understand the meaning? How long did I take to understand the meaning? Okay. Then if it's 3 or more, then again, look at why did I have to read this 3 times? Why did I read through this correctly? Why did I not pause while reading? So if you want to reduce time, slow down is what I would say. Again, this is based on my experience of having coached upwards of 50,000 students. But again, as you look at those 10 sentences, you do this exercise, you're going to be able to get to the cause. Once you get to the cause, addressing it is not going to be an issue. And again, I'm going to give you a motivation, some motivation for this. Just give me 1 second. Just 1 second over here. Yeah. We talked about this one guy, Jim, and I mean, this guy struggled with critical reasoning for a very long time. He spent a ton of time, practicing critical reasoning. He just couldn't go beyond 35th percentile. Then he put his head down and focused on it. And in 18 days, he was able to go from a 35th percentile in critical reasoning to the 97th percentile in critical reasoning. In fact, you go to this video, you look at the description, you're going to actually see his debrief on GMAT Club. You'd be able to download his ESRs, and you'd really see how, in a magical time, I mean, this happened. Lavanya says, my target score is 720. How much should I be scoring in mocks? So Lavanya, if your target score is 720, you should be able to get your abilities up there. You should be able to see that consistency in mock in the 710 to 730 bucket. That's kind of what I would say. If it's higher, it's even better. Okay. All right. I don't see any other questions in the Q&A pod. I want to thank you guys for joining me today. It was a pleasure hosting you. And thank you for being such a good audience. Remember, we still have that number properties webinar tomorrow. Do join me tomorrow. And if you've not registered for that, I can share the links for the same. So here's the number properties webinar. That's tomorrow. You can register for that. And then we have the reading comprehension webinar next week. All right. With that, I want to wish you goodbye, good evening, and have a good day. If you are in the US like me.